Hello, Garland Nixon here. It's Thursday morning, and I'm with Scott Ritter, and we got a lot to talk about. Let's talk. Hello, Garland Nixon here, along with Scott Ritter. We got lots to talk about. Don't forget, everybody, go to scottritter.com. That's right, scottritter.com, where you can see all of Scott's good work, and you can donate to help keep Scott going, to help allow him to continue to do his very, very important work. All right, Scott, let's go. Let's start here. You did a tweet that garnered a lot of attention. There is a case going on right now in the U.S. that I think is absolutely critical and important with everything that's going on with the attack on dissidents and journalists and pretty much everybody who opposes, a war and opposes international aggression. The Ohuru 3 trial. You've been following that. Tell me your thoughts on your latest thoughts on what's going on with that.
Let me first try and get myself in focus here.
Yeah.
There we go.
All right, there we go.
Magic. The FBI is tinkering with my camera.
No question.
I had the honor and privilege of interviewing the chairman of the Chairman O'Malley, Penny Hess, one of his associates, before this case went to trial. And to learn about them. This case is about free speech. The U.S. government's going to try and make it about something different. They put out an indictment against 3 individuals. That's what it's the Ohuru 3. Chairman O'Malley, Penny, and then somebody who is running for mayor of St. Petersburg, apparently. And they accused them of colluding with the Russians since 2015. Basically serving as an agent of the Russian government in an effort to undermine American elections and undermine American democracy. Stunning. And to be honest, the vast majority of Americans hadn't even heard of this case. And one of the reasons why they haven't heard of this case is that we're dealing with a Black nationalist movement. And guilty. I'm just going to be straight up honest. When I first heard of the Ohuru 3, I did a cursory thing. I went, Black nationalists. I don't want to touch this. I don't want to touch this thing with a 10-foot pole. Shame on me. Because, it's not about Black nationalists. It's about me. It's about you. It's about everybody here. Because this isn't about Chairman O'Malley or Penny Hess or any of the other accused or any of their associates. It's about free speech. And the thing about free speech in America is it's not about protecting the speech we agree with. It's about protecting all speech. And I'm not saying that I disagree with the speech of the Ohuru 3. I was ignorant of it, totally ignorant of it. I didn't even give them the courtesy of trying to find out what it was they said. I allowed my internal prejudices to step in and go, no, I don't want to touch this one, which is exactly why the government picked them. This is the dumbest case in the world, ladies and gentlemen. This is the first big prosecution under the Foreign Agent Registration Act targeting Russia. And that's what this is about, targeting Russia. This is designed to create the image of Russia interfering in American elections. Hell, the indictment's based upon that. Russian intelligence officers working with Russian intermediaries to take the Ohuru 3, who apparently were not unwitting, unlike other Americans who took millions of dollars, but they were witting. They were conspiring with them to do horrible things to America. What? Put a candidate up for the mayor of St. Petersburg. Here's the thing, though. One, the Ohuru 3, and this is where I'm ashamed of myself. I am totally ashamed of myself. When you hear Chairman O'Malley talk about this, he said, the Constitution wasn't written for Black people. The Constitution was written for white people. Black people were slaves. And then when black people were emancipated, he said the Constitution didn't apply to us either. The whole concept of Reconstruction, emancipation was the black people didn't factor in. He said we had to teach ourselves about the Constitution, about constitutional rights, define it for ourselves. At least that's from his perspective, which means that they take nothing for granted. They actually understand the Constitution, and they understand what the Constitution is supposed to represent. And when they do the things they do, they're doing it in defense of the Constitution. Now, I may nitpick. I'm not a constitutional scholar, but like anything, you can say, I don't agree with that. I don't agree with this. I don't agree with that. I don't agree with this. But you can't say these people don't know what they're defending. They're defending their rights and our rights of free press. And it's not just that. It's not just their ability to be to speak. It's their ability to be heard. It's an insult to all Americans to have the government try and shut down this voice. We should have the option to listen to them, to comprehend them, to understand them, what they're saying. And we should do that with everybody, whether we agree with them or disagree with them. That's what free speech is about. But the government picked this case because they thought there would be enough Americans like me who would just turn away from it. And in doing so, turn away from the Constitution, because this case could establish significant precedent going forward for, guess what? Maybe a prosecution of me, maybe a prosecution of you, maybe a prosecution of everybody. People say, yeah, but you wrote for RT. Oh, really? Yeah, you guys are geniuses. You think this is about that? This is about the government getting the tools to shut down all dissent. One of the interesting things that came out of the Ohuru 3 preparation for the trial is definition. And the government was trying to define what disinformation was. And here, Garland, I'm not making this up. This sounds like a comedy show, but you know what the judge said? It's not, it can be disinformation even if it's true. It can be disinformation even if it's true, because the definition of disinformation for the government is anything that goes against the official narrative. Wow. So I was an agent of disinformation when I stood up against the war in Iraq for saying there are no weapons of mass destruction. Not because I was lying, but because I was telling the truth. And the truth was against the government-run narrative. And according to this judge, that makes me an enemy of America. Wrong, judge, you got it wrong. You see, free press is about the truth. Free press is about standing up to the government when it lies to you. The government carries out disinformation. We know that. 1971, United States versus New York Times. The Justice, gosh, I'm forgetting his name right now. But he came out and he said that the purpose of free speech is to enable we, the people, to challenge the government without fear of repercussion when the government seeks to deceive about issues, especially when those issues the potential of a war in foreign lands. So that's what this is about. But the government's trying to make this about, Russia. Well, here's the interesting thing. This trial was supposed to last 3 weeks. The government said, we're going to need 3 weeks to run this thing. Their case, it just exploded on them, fell apart. They're done in 5 days. They're now, it's gone to the jury. And hopefully you do the right thing. But the last day they brought the lead FBI investigator, just so everybody understands, this is the guy who manages all the data that goes into the subpoenas, into the warrants, probable cause. This is the guy that assembles the data that was presented to the grand jury that put out this indictment. This is the guy that created the indictment itself that put them on trial. And he was asked straight up, is there any evidence that Russian intelligence was involved in any aspect of this? He said, no. Was there any evidence that the Russians were trying to cook the elections in St. Petersburg, which you mentioned in your indictment? No evidence whatsoever. Why is it in the indictment? I didn't write the indictment, but you prepared all the data and you're aware of the indictment, right? Yes. Why was it out in the Department of Justice press release? Is any of this true? No. Ladies and gentlemen, this is an indictment of America, where the FBI knows that the information the Department of Justice was using to give a warrant to search your house, and they didn't search the Uhuru Three's homes lightly. They stormed in with grenades and automatic weapons and blowing things up and, pointing weapons at people, threatening to kill people on an indictment that was baseless. Baseless. If you're not enraged by this, you're not a human, and B, you're not an American. We all took oaths, those of us who served, to uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States of America against all enemy, foreign and domestic. And ladies and gentlemen, the Department of Justice and FBI, and indeed the court system, which has allowed this travesty to go forward, have exposed themselves as the domestic enemies of the Constitution. We have a duty and responsibility to do something here. If you haven't heard about the Uhuru Three, learn about them and start supporting them. Hopefully the jury will do the right thing, but if the jury doesn't do the right thing, then this must go to appeal, and we must start speaking out about the travesty of justice that's taking place here. But it's not just about justice. This is about who we are and what we are as a nation collectively, the Constitution. This is defense of you and us. This is shocking that this had happened. This isn't about normally the United States government is, the people versus, but the government isn't the people. Please don't allow them to steal that title. We are the people. The person, especially when it comes to free speech and a free press, the person on trial is us. We're on trial. That jury's on trial. America is on trial against people who don't have the best interests of this nation at heart. So yeah, this is literally the trial of our lifetime, because this will define how the government proceeds. Hopefully the government will get a crushing defeat, that the jury will come back and say, hell no. But we
don't know. Yeah, you don't know. I've been done a lot of times.
You never know with a jury. Yeah.
And I add this. Look, if you remember, well, right now the Democratic Party is suing the Green Party and suing everybody to get them off of the roll, so no people can't vote for them. They accused Jill Stein in the past because she went to an RT dinner in Moscow of being a Russian agent. They've the Libertarians, if you remember, they had the Rage Against the War Machine, and they accused them of it. So if they were able to do this small little African People's Socialist Party, the Libertarian Party, the Green Party, the American, whatever communist, but whatever party, there's all kind of parties. There's people, some guy named Tanner running. I don't even know what this party is right. But bottom line, I don't know who the guy is. Somebody sent me an email and asked me to interview this guy for running for president. But here's what I say. But whoever he is, he's got a right to run. Whoever he is, if he meets the constitutional criteria, he has a right to run, right? But I think if you allow them to open this door, Libertarian Party, Green Party, this party, that party, one by one, they will go after these other parties, accuse them of being agents for fill in the blank, and that it's the camel under the camel's nose under the tent thing, that these other parties should be screaming at their just like when they went after Alex Jones and all these people, he's Alex Jones, InfoWars, blah, 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 blah. And now a lot of those same people that kept their mouths shut are thrown off of Twitter and X and deplatformed also.
What about MAGA?
Yeah.
We're talking about 74 million people, 74 million Americans overnight will become the enemies of the United States if they allow this to happen, because this is about misinformation, disinformation. The entire Democrat stance is everything that comes out of Trump's mouth, unfortunately, some of it, they're right, is disinformation. It's wrong. It's factually incorrect and all this. And therefore, anybody who supports them are guilty by association. The Democrats will seek to silence 74 million American votes. And guys, if it doesn't matter what issue you stand on, it doesn't. And remember, disinformation isn't being wrong. It's going against the government-controlled narrative. A narrative which, by the way, is echoed by mainstream media. So CNN becomes an agent, and you saw this, the whole way they treated this debate, MSNBC, everything else. They are literal agents of not the government of America, but the Democratic Party, which has seized control of the government. And they don't want to relinquish control because they're afraid of what's going to happen if the Republicans win. We are a fundamentally broken nation. And we, the people, are paying the price. And the one thing that we can do to fix it, the only thing we can do to fix it, is to participate in elections. But elections only work if we're able to articulate freely, without fear of repercussion, our points of view, the issues that we support. I don't know where people stand on the Second Amendment, and I don't care. when you stand on the Second Amendment. You have a right to stand wherever you want. It's America. But the government will criminalize your right to speak out for or against. I don't know where you stand on right to life. I don't care. It's your business. But the government will criminalize your speaking out. They will silence you. Now we know the government can put pressure on social media. The Supreme Court's idiotic decision, even though it was on a technicality, not on the merits, has empowered. That's why they came after me. Literally. The reason why they came after me is because the Supreme Court made its decision. The New York Times wrote about this, and the federal government went, oh, so we're allowed to shut people down. Free speech is done. Go after it. They're attacking me, not because I'm a Russian agent. I'm not. They know it too. They have my computers. They're going through it going, what we're looking for isn't here. And they're not going to find it. I'm a patriotic American who has the audacity to challenge their narrative on Russia by speaking to Russians, working with Russians to learn more about Russia, to better educate the American public. And remember, it's not that I'm wrong, ladies and gentlemen. My facts are facts. The truth is the truth. But it's disinformation because I'm going against the official narrative. Garland, you are a practitioner of disinformation because you're going against the official narrative. I mean, this is where we are in America today. This is as Orwellian as it gets, where up is down, left is right, right is wrong, black is white. It is literally just the opposite of what it is. Disinformation isn't about being truthful. It's about opposing the official government narrative, which, again, according to the 1971 Supreme Court thing, that's our job. It's our job to go against the official narrative, especially when that narrative is designed to deceive the Americans about issues that could lead to war. And if you don't think all this thing about Russia isn't about going to war, you have been looking at the headlines. And I'm sure we're going to talk about, missiles and long-range strike and all that stuff. Ladies and gentlemen, we are literally on the fast track to nuclear annihilation. I don't know how to say it any more clear than this. What we're doing is we're removing all obstacles. And the government, there was a time when what I'm saying isn't disinformation, because there was a time when the Biden administration said we can't allow them to use long-range strike weapons against Russia because that could lead to World War III. Okay, so when I said that, I wasn't being an agent of disinformation, because that part of what I was saying conformed with the government's official narrative. But now the narrative changed. No, we must allow Ukraine to win. How does Ukraine win against a nuclear state? A nuclear state doesn't lose. That's why they have nuclear weapons. So this whole thing is insane. But now I'm practicing disinformation for daring to say what is obviously factually correct. But I mean, I'm not picking on my friends. I love them to death. I won't use their names. They know who they are if they're listening. I saw them last night in the parking lot. We haven't seen each other for a while. Scott, what's going on? The FBI raided your house. But literally, these are very good friends I've known for many years. And the wife said, why are you so pro-Putin? I said, I'm not pro-Putin. What makes you think I'm pro-Putin? But you're saying all these things about Russia. But everything I'm saying is true. I mean, it's not being pro anything. It's pro-truth. I said, I'm pro-American. You guys know me. And they're like, no, we know you. We know you're a Marine. We know that you stand for America and all that. That's why we're so shocked why you've taken this stance on Russia. And I said, well, you know that I don't want a nuclear war, right? Well, yes. And we'd go to nuclear war against Russia, right? Yes. So maybe we need to learn more about Russia, right? Well, yes, that makes sense. So I go to Russia, right? And you guys respect me? Yes. So I come back from Russia and I say, what I saw needs to be understood by all Americans, because Russia isn't a threat worthy of war, let alone a nuclear war. How is that pro-Putin? It's the most pro-American thing I could do, to empower you to lift the veil off your eyes so you go, holy cow, Russia's not what the government narrative says it is. And they started to see the light. I would need about another week of therapy with them to bring them over. But all Americans are like this, unfortunately. Americans are ignorant as the day is long about Russia. And anytime anybody dares try to confront them with an alternative reality, a reality that differs from the narrative being promulgated by the government, we're accused of being disinformation artists, practitioners of misinformation, of being pro-Putin. I don't work for Vladimir Putin. I respect him. I respect his history. I respect what he's accomplished, but I don't work for him. I don't work for anybody. I work for myself, the American people. I defend the Constitution. But people can't grasp that. The FBI definitely can't grasp that. They think that somehow, because I've taken this position in such a strong stance, that it can't be independently held. I mean, what a disrespectful attitude towards the American people that is, that we are incapable of independently holding a point of view that differs from the official narrative. Why don't you trust us? Well, because you're from the government. And history shows that you can't be trusted, especially the FBI, which, according to the Ohuru 3 trial transcripts, show that you cook up nonsense. You lie to make an indictment so that you can terrorize people, so that you can suppress free speech of all Americans. Why would I ever trust the FBI? Why would I ever trust the Department of Justice?
You're right. What we're talking about, it's not about whether you're right or wrong. It's about they won't tolerate opposing opinions. They refuse to tolerate opposing opinions. Now let's talk about something something's important. So now, lately, I don't know if you've been following this. The U.S. says now they're going to send Typhoon missile launchers to Japan, which would allow the use of nuclear. How stupid is that of the Japanese? But of course, Japan is not an independent sovereign nation. But at any rate, so they will send Typhoon missile launchers to Japan that can, of course, then launch nuclear weapons against, North Korea or China. Okay. So Russia and China, I'm reading this as a comment from Maria Zarafikova. It's clear that both Russia and China will react to the emergence of additional and very significant missile threats, and their reaction will be far from political, which has also been repeatedly confirmed by the two countries. What we're seeing is the U.S. pushing Russia and China together, the U.S. putting missiles on both Russia and China. And I think what I've been hearing from Russia more than, oh, we're going to blow you guys to smithereens, is we're going to arm your damn adversaries to the teeth, right? I have heard that they were planning, they were discussing giving some significant missile technology to the Houthis, and that they talked with Saudi Arabia and some others, kind of talked them down from that. But this is going to who knows what could show up in Houthiville, shall we say. And China is saying similar things, that, okay, if you put these missile launchers in here, then we will have to respond, accordingly, blah, blah, blah. I think what we're going to be looking at is Russia and China doing similar to what Iran has done with the axis of resistance. I've said this for a while, learning that, you know what, we can be a force multiplier in this region. Yeah, we're sitting here, but if we have allies and we arm them to the teeth, it makes you a whole lot harder to come to us. And you got to look all over your shoulders, and you don't want this fight. And I think they're pushing Russia and China to a point where they're going to start moving in that direction and arming their allies to the teeth, which to me is a defensive move, because the U.S. is trying to surround them with missiles. Anyway, I throw all that at you, Scott Ritter.
First of all, what you're saying is correct. We are crossing red line after red line. We are committing provocation after provocation. And we don't ever think through the consequences of our actions. Everything has a cause and effect relationship. And normally you would have policy people with intelligence people sitting down going, okay, it's called strategizing. If we do this, what would they do in response? What were they, what do they have the ability to do? And then would that also provoke them developing additional capabilities they might not otherwise consider? And then what do we have to do? And if we do that, how do they respond to that? And then you look at this and you go, wow, we don't want to end up there. So how do we reverse engineer this to get to where we want to end up? But that's not what's happening right now. Right now, everything is done on a very short, overly politicized timeline. Like, oh my God, we have an election in November, and we have to be seen as being strong against China. So therefore we have to continue to push an anti-Chinese narrative, disinformation again, and the same thing with Russia. Oh my God, we can't be seen as losing in Ukraine, even though we're losing in Ukraine. So we have to do things that make it appear as if we sincerely want Ukraine to win, and we're positioned. But it's all done based upon the time frame between now and November 5th. The national security of the United States, I would say by extension the world, is being put at risk because the people in the White House are scared to death that the American people will wake up to the reality that they suck when it comes to national defense. They put us in a horrible position. And instead of doing the right thing, which is to say, hey, we're gonna be patient on this one. We know we have an election coming up, but there's no reason to escalate here. We're going to hold back and let the next president make these decisions, and do this in a more, carefully considered, well-reasoned approach. Nope, we just boom. Fortunately for us, we have opponents, adversaries that aren't working off of short timelines. They're looking off of long timelines. And both the Russians and the Chinese right now are looking to what's going to happen in Kazan in October, the BRICS summit. This is, one of the game-changing moments of global history. It has the potential to be that, where you take a theory of a consensus-driven multilateral organization and you make it reality. The Russians have been working overtime together with the Chinese, the Indians, and everybody else to build the infrastructure necessary to have an establishment, to have institutions within BRICS that enable the kind of interaction between governments at multiple levels simultaneously, so that policy can be coordinated, so that when it comes time to have a summit meeting, consensus has already been reached. You don't have a meeting for a week or so where you expect everybody to debate the most contentious issues. It doesn't work that way. To be successful, like the G7, you don't think the first time the participants in the G7 hear about the issues that are up, for discussion. The first time they hear is when they sit down at the table. So what do you got for me now? Well, we're going to talk about, World War III. Oh, gee, I'm not ready for that discussion yet. No, they've heard about it now for months, maybe years, as it's being worked out, as they put, hey, we got a problem. Our legislators are going to support that. Boom, boom, boom. They work it out so that by the time they sit down at the table, they're ready to sign off on a joint statement. BRICS is moving in that direction. And if they can get this kind of gravitas, it's game, set, match. They'll dominate the G7. They'll dominate the rules-based international order. That's what they're looking at. So the Chinese aren't going to, nuke Japan. But what the Chinese will do is say, okay, what we're going to do is now put forward capabilities that not only respond to this, but if need be, will destroy Japan. So Japan's just basically put themselves on the fast checkout lane in any future conflict. What are the Russians going to do? There's a lot of people out there. Oh, well, if Ukraine strikes these targets, Russia has to nuke NATO. Why? Why would Russia have to nuke NATO? Russia is beating us. China's beating us. That's what people don't understand. They're looking at these tactical moves going, missiles in Japan, America's going to win. China's going, while you're doing that, we got this big conference taking place about Africa coming to China. All the African leaders are coming to China. And you know what they're talking about? Expanded economic cooperation, which means expanded geopolitical influence, which means money, control of the global economy for us. So you go ahead and put your little pathetic missile systems in Japan. We're big enough, we can put some military capabilities there, but we don't care. What we care about is that all of Africa is coming to us and they're not coming to you. Hey, France, how's your France Afrique working out? Oh, it collapsed. Oh, my goodness. So neocolonialism isn't a good concept. America, your rules-based international order, how does it work out when you dictate to Africa all outcomes? They're ignoring you. They're coming to us. Thank you very much. We appreciate it. That's China. China's working on that. China's working on developing relationships with the Indo-Pacific nations. Russia's building BRICS. Russia's in Africa too. All that vacuum that's created in the Sahel has been filled by the Russians from a security standpoint. They're winning. They're literally winning. And so why would they prevent the victory by responding precipitously? I mean, it's going to be embarrassing to them if a missile hits something and kills some people and blows up some capabilities. And if they hit the wrong target, well, then it becomes a different discussion, doesn't it? If they strike a national command and control capability, if they threaten Putin's ability to to exercise leadership over Russia, if they threaten Russia's strategic nuclear deterrence. Well, it's a different game altogether. Now we're getting into existential issues, and Russia will probably use nuclear weapons. But until that is reached, Russia will just absorb. This is a nation that took 27 million casualties, dead in World War II. Okay, you think they're going to suddenly fold like a house of cards because a Storm Shadow missile hit an army level command post, in the oblast of Voronezh? They'll be pissed off, angry, but they're not going to fold. They're winning this war. There's nothing Ukraine can do to win this war. The only way Ukraine comes out of this with anything other than unconditional surrender is through nuclear annihilation, and that will only happen if Russia decides to nuke everybody. Russia's not going to nuke NATO. That's my belief. I don't believe Russia's going to overreact. I don't see the Russians panicking. I see the Russians calling it out for what it is and saying that there will be consequences. But Russia's, as you said, Russia doesn't have to sink an American Navy ship. The Houthi will do that for the Russians. Russia doesn't have to sink an American carrier. Hezbollah will do that for the Russians. Russia will give all these nations the capabilities necessary, nations that are already in a conflict status with the United States. Russia doesn't need to get into that. Russia will use hybrid warfare, asymmetrical warfare, to replicate the pressure put on the United States that the United States and NATO have put on Russia through their Ukrainian proxy. You see, Russia's hands are somewhat tied because of this Ukrainian proxy. If they don't want to expand the conflict, they have to limit their retaliation to Ukraine, because to strike NATO would create the conditions for a regional nuclear conflict. They don't want that. Well, they're going to flip the script on America now, too. Rather than attacking American ships and turning this into a Russian-American war, American ships are going to sink. And as an American, this bothers me tremendously, because while I despise the policymakers, I respect the men and women who put on the uniform, who serve our country. Their job is to implement policy. I would like them to be implementing good policy, sound policy, but instead they're put in harm's way to support bad policy. And they're the ones who are going to pay the price, them and their families. If a ship goes down, we're going to lose a lot of people. If a carrier goes down, we're going to lose thousands of people. But this is the direction we're heading. Russia will not sit back and just allow the United States and NATO, Great Britain, to use Ukraine as a proxy just to punch Russia and with no consequences. There will be consequences, but the consequences will be done in a way that doesn't get Russia kicked off of its strategic path. Its strategic path is heading to Kazan, to a BRICS summit, and to the empowerment of a consensus-driven multipolar world that successfully challenges American unilateralism and the rules-based international order.
And Xi Jinping has announced that he's going to be in Kazan. So this is going to be
Modi.
Yeah. So let me tell you, a whole lot more people are trying to get tickets there now. The kind of names that are going to be there, a lot. I'll put it like this: they're not looking around to see where Kamala Harris or Trump or somewhere or Justin Trudeau is going to be. Those people right now are huge power players. Now, let me add
Erdogan's going to go.
Yeah, he wants BRICS. I don't blame him.
Serbia just said, if you continue doing what we're going,
yeah,
we're dumping the EU. I think this is going to become a trend. Dump the EU, go to BRICS. And you'll see everybody moving that way if BRICS becomes what Russia's trying to make it become.
Yeah. What's interesting also is a couple of things going on that's related. Okay, so this stuff happens. Russia's doing this Ocean 24, right, where they got all of the Pacific fleet, all their fleet everywhere, right? They're doing all kinds of stuff. China's involved in some of it, and they're saying openly, look, China and Russia can respond to these things together. I'll read something else from Maria Zakharova. She says, this is a defensive position. This is not an initiative to target other countries. But, and as John Conyers once said to me, but means ignore everything I said before I said but, right? But if an aggressive policy of attack is being implemented against us from one center, I think we know who that is, why don't we combine our potential and give an appropriate rebuff? And it's like we've been talking about for a long time. If you combine the military potential of Russia and China, they dominate. The Chinese Navy, the Russian Navy, just forget it. All of them combined and a U.S. military which spread all over the damn world, and they're having trouble getting people to join now, and et cetera, that are involved in conflict. It's absurd, but it only makes sense that the two will. But in the same way that former so-called realists would say, we don't want Russia and China to come together, and God knows we don't want Russia, China, and Iran to come together. Now, Russia and China, the horror of the U.S. empire, bringing their military potential together creates an insurmountable, a military issue for the U.S. Now, these neocons are still idiots, but they're getting closer and closer. They haven't announced a military alliance, but I got a feeling if you punch one of them, the other's punching along with it. I don't see how we can get a whole lot closer than a military alliance. Then they're literally saying, look, if one guy's coming after both of us, we got to combine our, come on now, guys. Anyway, Scott.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting what they're doing, because it's like when Russia and China met in February of 2022, before the special military operation kicked off in Beijing. Vladimir Putin flew to Beijing and met with Xi Jinping, and they issued that 5,000-word joint statement. It was basically a declaration of war against the a declaration of political war against the rules-based international order, promoting what they call law-based international order. They said that this is stronger than any alliance because, and here's the important thing, and again, it blows Western minds because we're so focused on NATO and Article 5 and all that. Read Article 5. It's not what they say it is, guys. It's not what they say it is. They say it's stronger in alliance because an alliance is limiting. Alliance limits it. It defines the four corners of a relationship, and it commits you in an inflexible path. This is greater than alliance because there's no limits. We can make it anything we want it to be. And that bothers us because we don't know what that means. Now, I'm a military planner, hypothetically. I used to be, but now let's say I'm a hypothetical American military planner working on contingencies. And I'm sitting down with the State Department, the interagency, and we're talking about provoking Russia in the Southern Caucasus. We need to kick things up to keep pressure on the Russians. What are we going to do about Armenia? What can we do in Armenia? Get the Armenians up. Maybe we can get a revolution going on in Georgia and their election coming up because we're Americans and we're just going to needle away. But assumptions have to be made. If things blow up, if the Russians come in, localized conflict. So now I'm planning and I'm saying, okay, I'm going to need resources for this, guys. And all the other players are out there going, well, wait a minute, what do you mean resources? Well, I mean, if we're going to help the Armenians, I might have to open up a logistics supply to get some ATACMS missiles in there, some HIMARS missiles. And the Pacific guys going, hey, we've already identified a critical shortage for a Korean scenario. And they said, well, don't worry, this is going to be a localized conflict. We'll just keep everything stable in Korea. We're going to draw from you, and then we'll replenish it later on in the next fiscal year. Oh, okay. So military planning is done that way. It's the same thing. We want to do something in the South China Sea. The Navy goes, well, we only can get 3 aircraft carriers out at once. We only have 11 of them. And they're in maintenance cycles, et cetera. Maybe we can get a 4th carrier out there. But, we got the Middle East cooking up. We got 2 permanently committed there. We took the 3rd one out of the Pacific. But now you want to do a South China Sea thing. We're going to need 3 carrier battle groups. That means that we can't support Israel the way we've promised to support Israel. So we have to keep things toned down in Israel or in Syria. You see what I'm saying, Garland? The way we plan, America, is we plan on all of these things being localized so that we can surge resources, limited resources to the problem to deal with the problem. That means we can't deal with the other problems. What did Russia just do and China just do with this exercise? They said there ain't no such thing as localized. If the single center of power, the United States, creates a problem for us, one place, we're going to make it a problem for them everywhere. We don't have the resources to deal with that. Now we've just complicated all military planning because now a military planner, after hearing this, has to say, well, I'm in the Korean guy. You can't have my HIMARS and my ATACMS. You can't have them. I need them. Not only do I need them, I need more, a lot more. Europe's going, whoa, no, you can't divert brigades that are earmarked to come here. We need those, and we need more. We need artillery ammunition, a lot of it. The guys in the Pacific, nope, Taiwan maybe. We need ships committed, dedicated. So if it goes bad, we know what we're getting. And now the military planners are going, we don't have the forces capable of doing this. There was a time back when I was in, we could fight 2.5 wars. We could fight a major war in Europe, a major war in the Pacific. We expected to win both of those and fight a holding action in the Middle East until we won one of the wars, then we convert those resources and win the war in the Middle East. 2.5 wars. Today, we can't even fight a half war. We don't have the forces for it. We have the forces to do localized police actions, but we can't fight a major war. Everybody's talking about a war in Europe. With what? But there's no sustainability. None. In the Cold War, we had close to 300,000 troops permanently stationed in Germany, ready to fight, and the ability to surge another 300,000 there within 10 days, 600,000 troops, and then we could begin mobilization that could bring in millions if necessary. Today, we got 100,000 guys in Germany, and there's nothing left to reinforce them with. There's nothing left. It just doesn't. We don't have the military to do it. And people say, well, we could always recruit more. No, we can't. Nobody's joining the Army. The Army's shrinking because we can't. The Navy's shrinking. 17 ships are being decommissioned because we don't have the troops. Aircraft carriers are playing with 85% manning. And it's unsustainable. So what the Russians did, I think, is genius. Absolute genius, because they sent a signal. Again, to the average American, we don't see that because we don't understand how contingency planning works. But I can guarantee you in the bowels of the Pentagon, there are sleepless nights right now as people are starting to go, but here's the dangerous thing. Because we lack the conventional capacity to respond to these crises, we then fall back on nuclear employment plans. And this is where Donald Trump probably killed every American without knowing it, because he implemented a new nuclear posture that talked about bringing in low-yield nuclear weapons and deploying them forward. One of them was on a weapon that hadn't been developed yet, a Navy cruise missile. That I think that program got canceled. But the other one went on Trident missiles on Ohio-class submarines. And Mark Esper actually practiced the procedures for launching one against Russia in a Baltic scenario. We now have a nuclear doctrine that says we can use low-yield nuclear weapons preemptively in a non-nuclear environment if the situation warrants. Well, I just described to you that we don't have conventional forces to respond to emergencies around the world. So if we get into a fight and we suddenly lack the conventional resources, in come the low-yield nuclear weapons, and now we're all going to die. Come on, America, wake up. This is happening. Are you aware of it? Is it sinking in yet? That our government, because of their ignorance, their inability to accept the fact that the world doesn't want an American hegemon, our government's going to kill us all because we don't have the ability to back our mouths up conventionally. And so we will go nuclear, and we will go nuclear preemptively, unless, of course, the Russians preempt us, which is why they've come up with a new nuclear doctrine. They haven't bragged about it, but I had an interesting exchange with Ambassador Polyansky the other day. And I put forward my theory that the Russians will probably embrace a policy of nuclear preemption because they can't afford to allow the United States, NATO, to accumulate a combination of conventional and nuclear precision strike capabilities. Now we come back to Ukraine getting the green light to send missiles into Russia long range. It's not just isolated, ladies and gentlemen. The Russians look at that and say, if the Ukrainians get to launch these missiles, in theory, that could be the first wave, then followed by a NATO wave of conventional, followed by an American wave of nuclear designed to preemptively take us out. That's how I would think if I were the Russians. And then I'd say, well, how do I stop that? Oh, nuclear preemption. And so now we may have triggered World War III. Because if Ukraine does begin using these weapons, and remember, these are weapons that are guided to their targets by American and British intelligence. The Ukrainians can't guide them in on their own. So the target lists are approved in advance by the United States. We provide them with the intelligence. We're attacking Russia. We are literally attacking Russia. American weapons, British weapons, American intelligence, British intelligence, American approved targets. We're attacking Russia. And so the Russians have every right to, if we start hitting the wrong targets, what I mean by the wrong targets is the targets that really are sensitive to Russia. Russia has every right to say, this is the beginning of an American plan that could then lead to a NATO commitment of weapons. America, we need to preempt it now. Push the button. Pop, there goes London. There goes Paris. There goes Brussels. There goes Warsaw. There goes all this. And then they turn to America and say, what are you going to do about it? And do we really want to be in that situation? Because no American president is going to back down. This is where Russia's wrong. They think America will back down. They don't think we're going to trade Boston for a Polish city. We have no choice at that point in time but to launch, and we will launch, and then they will launch, and then we all die. There's an important book out there, Annie Jacobson. I recommend it. She's the author. I think it's called Nuclear War or something of that nature, but it's fiction. But she puts out a scenario-driven narrative. The world ends in 76 minutes. The world ends in 76 minutes. That's it. From the start of the crisis to everybody dying, the world ends in 76 minutes. What are you doing to stop this, American? What are you doing to stop this?
Last but not least, I did want to get an update on battlefield update, the Kursk, which seems to have been, as many of us thought it would be, very, very bad move tactically and strategically, because you just put a lot of very good troops out there and a lot of equipment in an area where they could be dashed to bits. And of course, you now do not have the reserves to back up various towns, Ugledar, Petrovsk, half of them I can't pronounce anyway, that are falling. It seems to me that they precipitated a much quicker victory for Russia. Your thoughts on the battlefield?
Yeah, I'm being facetious here, but the Russians couldn't have asked for a better battle plan to be implemented by the Ukrainians, because Russia always had to be, Abdialadonov talked about this. He's the Russian Major General, Chechen, who is heavily involved in this fighting, in Donbass and then now in Kursk. And he said the Russians were always confident that they were going through attrition warfare, wear the Ukrainians down to the point of break. But what they didn't know is when Ukraine would commit their reserves and what the consequence, because the reserves are very well trained, very well equipped, very, very capable troops. And so you have about 20,000 of them that had to be, top-notch guys, maybe another 20,000 less, but those could be brought in. So Russia always had to keep their own reserves in play. So they're pushing forward, stretching them out. But if the Ukrainians were to thrust in with these reserves, Russia has to be able to seal that off and continue the pressure. And so there's a lot of uncertainty. Well, thanks to Kursk, there's no more uncertainty. Not only did the Ukrainians commit their reserves, but they committed them far away from the Donbass. And so now the Russians are going, they ain't got nothing left. So now they're able to bring in these reserves that they held back and continue to push. Now, Ukraine has some localized reserves. Remember, collapse doesn't happen instantly. It's a long, drawn-out process. The 20,000 that went into Kursk were strategic reserves. They still have some localized reserves, and you see that. They brought the 47th Brigade into Pokrovsk, and the Russians, had exhausted their assault. Pokrovsk came in, so they're regrouping. But now they've committed that reserve, which means they can't go anywhere else. So the Russians go, okay, hold at Pokrovsk, Uladar, come in here, flank here, Kupiansk, come down. The Ukrainians are going, we don't have any reserve. Eventually, they're going to have to take the 47th Brigade out of Pokrovsk and fill another hole. And then the Russians go, okay, bring in these reserves and keep pushing to Pokrovsk and capture Pokrovsk. That's what's happening around. And eventually the 47th Brigade won't exist because there's nothing to replace it. As it loses all of its equipment, it ceases to exist. Meanwhile, up in Kursk, all the big fancy assault units are bleeding out. They're dying. The Russians have launched, significant counterattacks over the course of the last couple of days that are just, even the Russians are saying the level of death and destruction is unprecedented in this conflict. The Ukrainians are just being slaughtered as we speak. And that's it. They lost their strategic reserves. They're getting beat on the Donbass. And I think this has accelerated, the total collapse, which is coming. Even the Ukrainian high command saying, we don't have anything left, which is why you have this act of desperation right now. The United States giving Ukraine the green light to use these weapons because we know what's coming. We're positioning ourselves politically to say we did everything possible to help Ukraine win, short of boots on the ground, and we're not putting boots on the ground. And that's what's happening here, because when the collapse comes, if they haven't given Ukraine the green light, then it becomes a political problem, because people will say Ukraine collapsed because you failed to do X, Y, and Z. And so we have politicians, filling in those boxes, not because we think it's going to help Ukraine. It's not. It's just to cover their butts politically for the consequences of the inevitable collapse of the Ukraine. And that's the direction this is heading. It may not happen this year. The Russians have made it clear that they're not holding to any timetable. But for the Ukrainians' sake of Ukraine, it better happen sooner rather than later, because if this rolls into the winter, it's going to be horrible for the Ukraine. It's already going to be horrible. But if you're at war in a wintertime, when you don't have electricity, when you don't have gas, when you don't have food, when you don't have running water, this becomes a tragedy for the Ukrainian nation. We're talking about the potential of massive starvation, disease, I don't know if it's a pandemic, but you can have these outbreaks of disease that can't be controlled. People are going to freeze to death. I mean, this is the fate of Ukraine. Hey, thank you, Tony Blinken. You just condemned hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians to die, and nobody says that to them. Nobody says you understand that what you did is just condemn a nation to die.
And one other thing. Okay, you got, I don't know, let's say 20 million Ukrainians. It is the nature of people to run to high ground. What you will have is millions of refugees crossing the border into Europe. If I don't have electricity and I don't have food, and there's a border, and on the other side there's somebody that has electricity and food that I can take or beg for or get the hell out of here. In the event that you have some type of collapse, they're going to be crossing the border, screaming to Poland and anyone else they can, hey, it's cold. And now you're going to have millions of people, hundreds of thousands of people on your border, a disaster. Might I add, it seems to me, based on what's happening politically in France, where Macron is struggling to deal with people that want to impeach him because basically the voters are we've had enough. Germany, where the voters are starting to say we've had enough, and now Olaf Scholz is finally, well, perhaps we need to do some negotiating here, which nobody trusts. The other part of this is that the support for this conflict is collapsing in Europe, and the support for the ruling elite that have dragged them into this monstrosity is collapsing along with it. And Europe's heading towards something that Scott Ritter, I could probably go back and find it at the very beginning. You predicted this political crisis, the eventuality of this political crisis they're dealing with in Europe, that's spreading in Europe, Scott.
Yeah. The interesting thing, you remember when this war first started, this special military operation, and millions of Ukrainians fled, how they were warmly received by the Europeans. Romania, please come in. Poland, please come in. Everybody, please come in. Please come in. Europe's in the midst of an immigrant crisis, and it's bringing out the worst in Europe, because what's happening is, and you can see it on X, where they show the post. They show a swimming pool in Brussels, and it's dominated by Black Africans, immigrants who are in there. There's no white people to be seen. A swimming pool in Poland, and it's all white people. And the implication is that because Poland is denied immigrants, racial purity is great. We preserve racial purity. Da 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 da. Look, I believe borders should be controlled and everything, but this is getting ugly. This is turning into a very ugly thing. With racial and ethnic mixes being turned against one another. The Ukrainians don't realize, or maybe they are starting to realize, that they've become the white equivalent of Africans. Nobody likes them anymore. They will not be welcome in. They have overstayed their welcome. Nobody supports them. People are starting to reject them. The Ukrainians have become this pariah people, not just a pariah state, but a pariah people. And so even if they do get to Europe, they're not going to get the good jobs. They're not going to get the great housing. They're not going to be treated as, the ethnic equivalents of the Poles and all that. No. You're just like Black Africans now. We don't like you. There'll be no opportunities, which means that, all the Ukrainian people that flee to Europe, if you're a woman, you're probably going to get involved in the sex industry. That's just the tragic reality of it. If you're a child, you're going to get no education because they don't want to educate you because it costs too much. So you're going to be a child of the street, which leads open to A, no future, and B, further exploitation. And if you're a man, you'll become a criminal because nobody's going to hire you. You're going to become a criminal. And as a criminal, you'll be hunted down by that society. The Ukrainians are going to become literally the pariahs of Europe, and Europe will turn on them. And this is just what I keep telling people. I keep trying to tell the Ukrainians, Europe is not your friend. America is not your friend. There's only one country in the world right now that will treat the Ukrainians with respect, as long as you're not a banderist. And that's Russia, because you're a fellow Slav. The Russians want to be your friend. They are your friend. Look at the millions of Ukrainians living in Russia today, in peace, in harmony. They get the jobs. They're treated as equals. Their children go to school. Why? Because the Russians view them as human beings, as fellow Slavs, as brothers, as sisters, as cousins. This is I went to a restaurant in Moscow when I was there last. It's a Ukrainian restaurant where they all the wait staff dress up in Ukrainian national costume. They have menus that are in Russian and Ukrainian, and it's packed with Russians who are saying, "Yeah, no, this is cool." Because I asked them, I said, "It's a Ukrainian restaurant. You guys are at war. We're not at war with Ukraine. Ukrainians are our brothers. We're at war with the Banderas. We're at war with NATO. But no, Ukrainians are us. We're Ukrainians. We're the same. We're the same people." There's only one country in the world that treats the Ukrainians with the respect that they deserve, with the humanity that they deserve, and that's Russia. That's it. Prove me wrong on that. Prove me wrong. Go to Poland and see how they treat the Ukrainians. Go to Germany and see what they've done to the Ukrainians. Go to England and see what they're doing to the Ukrainians. Go to Italy. Go anywhere else. And you'll see that with the very few exceptions, they are turning their backs on the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians have become a problem for them, and Europe isn't the solution. Russia's the solution. But the Ukrainian people have been, bought out by the West under this false promise that America's your friend, Europe's your friend. Lindsey Graham's not your friend, guys. He's willing to let you die to the last Ukrainian so that the trillions of dollars of resources there go to America, not to Russia. Well, Russia doesn't want your resources. Russia would work with you to jointly develop those so that it's economically beneficial to all parties. But Russia's not out to steal anything. This is the tragedy of Ukraine. They are committing suicide, being goaded into this suicidal behavior by a West that doesn't care about them at all.
Last, I would like to ask you the current status of things going on in Gaza from your perspective. Of course, Israel's continuing to do the things that they've done, but it's been a year. We're a month away from a year. And I was reading the other day about some general or something who was critically injured in the conflict. And, I feel like we're not really hearing the truth about the casualties and the pain on the battlefield that Israel is suffering, and that they're in very bad desperation now, trying to drag the U.S. into a military conflict. I've said this before. I don't know. I guess they can hold up as long as the U.S. continues to pump stuff in there. But your thoughts on what's happening, the military conflict going on in the Gaza region?
Israel never prepared for war to last this long on any front. The entire Israeli modern day methodology of warfare is premised on deterrence. We have F-35s, we have F-15s, we have F-16s, we have Merkava tanks, we have artillery, we have missiles, we have the Iron Dome. Don't you dare get in a fight with us because we're going to win. And then they would, on occasion, engage in these short, very sharp conflicts where they sought to impose their will on an adversary, exploiting their technological supremacy. It's not designed to fight a sustained, battle of this nature, of this size, of this intensity. Logistically, and logistics determines every outcome in the military. Logistically, they're exhausted. They never thought they'd run out of spare parts for the Merkava main battle tank, but because they've been engaged in conflict for a year coming up, their tanks are all getting hit. They all get damaged. They all need repaired. Barrels are being worn out. Engines are breaking. Where are the spare parts? It used to be, we could fight a short conflict for 30 days, 40 days, and then fall back and we could repair everything. We had replacements. We had reserves we could draw upon. Their reserves are exhausted. These are civilian warriors who they're not intended to be pulled out of the job market for a year. And what's happened is the reserves are telling the government, we're done. We're not doing this. You got to get, and so you got to get a bigger military. So the Israeli military is talking about expanding the size of their regular military establishment because they can't count upon the sustained involvement of the reserves anymore. But where are they going to come from? The regular military has been worn down to a nub. These guys are exhausted. They're exhausted physically, but even more important, they're exhausted from a moral standpoint because there are soldiers. I just tell you, no matter who you are, war will break you. Well, the Israeli soldier is broken right now, broken. And you're going to have drug problems, alcohol problems, suicide problems when this war is done because they're going to have to deal with what they've done. Now, there's some of them who thrive in this. These are part of these reservists, the guys who are Talmudic students who enter these yeshivas that have a reserve military link so that they practice the Talmudic studies, but they serve together. These are the rapists. These are the people who believe it's okay to rape Palestinians. These are the people that believe that the Palestinians are the modern day equivalent of Amalek and must be annihilated. These are the people who commit war crimes on a daily basis that's approved by the Israeli system because the Israeli system created them. And this is devastating to a society that's supposed to be, we're the most moral army in the world. No, you're not. You have battalions literally that are modern day Einsatzgruppe who go into Gaza, go into the West Bank and commit atrocity after atrocity after atrocity on the Palestinians because the Palestinians aren't humans. They're animals. That's a statement coming straight from the Israeli government. They're not prosecuted. They raped people on camera, were put in prison, and now they're released and made social media heroes in Israel by the Talmudic embracers. This is just the reality. Israel is fundamentally broken. Their military is fundamentally broken, which is why there are many people, myself included, who believe that this can't go on much longer, that at some point in time, Israel will collapse from within because they can't bear the weight of their own history. They are an apartheid state. They are genocidal in nature. They have committed massive atrocities, and there's no mechanism to right the wrongs. And so the Israeli nation now is reflecting on the horrible reality of who they are. When they look in the mirror, what is looking back at them isn't the dream that they had envisioned. It's the red-eyed stare of a person who's committed horrific crimes and is now becoming aware of the consequences of these crimes. And that's the reality. I mean, is the Israeli military still lethal? Yeah, it is. But they're not winning. They're not winning in Gaza. They can't win against Hezbollah. They're not winning against the Houthi. They're not winning against Iran. They're not winning against anybody. Every day this conflict goes on, the Israeli military gets weaker and weaker and weaker, physically and morally.
And I'll add this, the Iranians have demonstrated something, and that is wisdom is more powerful than looking tough. The U.S., if somebody punches, what do you hear all the time? We got to look tough. We got to look strong. We got to look this. So the Iranians said, if you hit us, we hit back. So they hit Iran. But Iran, I'm sure, talked with Russia and talked with China and talked with everybody in the region and determined right now isn't a good time to do that. We'll do something else. You know what I mean? They could have struck back, but they did that because they want us to strike. They said, and so what I saw in Iran, to be quite frank, was wisdom. Yes, we can do this. Yes, we would be justified, but not the wisest move. So instead of that, we'll pick from a array. So it's like, I used to hear about George W. Bush. I heard the thing they said about him is on Monday, he decides what he's going to do on Wednesday. Regardless of what happens on Tuesday, he's going to do that on Wednesday. The Iranians have shown the word that comes to mind is wise. They said what they were going to do. They had every right to do it. The scenario was set up for them to do it, but they said, not a good move. We'll take another option. And basically, time is on their side, so they don't have to. Your thoughts on that? Last thing, Scott, and then we'll go.
No, I mean, the Iranians, the Russians, the Chinese, everybody seems to put diplomacy ahead of military action. The United States, it's Dwight D. Eisenhower warned us about this, the dominance of the military-industrial complex, especially when working in collusion with the United States Congress. You create this self-sustaining, engine, economic, political engine that needs war, needs conflict to continue. So we become a nation defined by war. When you go to the Middle East right now, in the embassies, the most powerful, influential American is an American general or American admiral, not the ambassador. The military is driving all solutions because the only solution we know is a military solution. And so we end up getting ourselves caught in these short-sighted traps. And why does Kamala Harris have to talk about wanting the most lethal military in the world? I mean, every military should be lethal, but what she should really be saying is, I want to empower the most, the wisest diplomatic corps in the world. I mean, that would be my lead thing.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm going to tell Congress that we're going to disband 3 carrier battle groups, and we're going to divert the money that's been allocated to that to the State Department, so the State Department can build up an effective corps of diplomats. This means that we're going to invest money in the institutions that train diplomats, Georgetown University, Harvard, et cetera, to totally revamp the way they're doing this, to bring in free thinkers. We want people who think freely. We don't want clones. And amazing, you bring in free thinkers, what do you get? You get Iranian policy. What I mean by that is you get people who say, hey, this would be pretty stupid for us to do right now. Why don't we hit the pause button on the knee-jerk reaction? And why don't we look at the bigger picture and see where we're going? How can we de-escalate in a manner that maximizes the opportunities for our nation? That's what a diplomat does. That's what diplomacy is supposed to do. Train people to talk, not shoot. And then spend all your time and effort on sustaining summits where people talk. And I don't care if they talk till your ears drop off. I don't care how frustrated you get, because you know what's not happening while they're talking? Kids ain't dying. Genocide isn't being committed. The youth of America is not being slaughtered on a battlefield or slaughtering people in a way that breaks them mentally so they come home and we have to take care of them for the rest of their lives. We have people who don't wake up thinking they have to join the military, but rather looking for good jobs in America, because America now has integrated itself in a global economy in a way that creates sustainable economic opportunity for Americans. My God, if people thought like that, but that's not how we think. We have to have the most lethal military. We have to do this. We have to do that. That's why we're losing around the world, because the world is becoming exhausted in American-driven wars. They're just exhausted by it. There's no benefit to this. And I think Iran serves as an example of of what the alternative to American or the allies of America, their forward-leaning militarism. Iran shows that you can have a capable military, you can have potential to defend yourself, but that the best defense is sometimes looking to de-escalate a crisis than escalate the crisis.
Scott Ritter. Don't forget, everybody, go to scottritter.com. That's Scott Ritter, his name.com, where you can find all of Scott's work. In addition, when you go there, make sure that you donate to help keep Scott, able to do this work and survive, as all of us, let's face it, it ain't that being a dissident and arguing for your convictions is not going to make you a millionaire. You're not going to get Rachel Maddow money by saying that U.S. Foreign policy is not going in the right direction. So go to scottritter.com and help. Make sure you follow him on social media so you can, repost and retweet his stuff. And also make sure you post this on all your social media platforms, and go to scottritter.com. Post that on all of your social media platforms so other people can click on it, go to Scott's site, and they can know where they can find all of his stuff. Thanks a lot, Scott, and I will talk to you soon.
Okay, thanks.
All righty. Thanks a lot, everybody. Don't forget, share this. Hit the like button. Smash the like button. If you're not subscribed, make sure you subscribe. And follow me also on Rumble. I'm on Rockfin. I'm on YouTube. I'm on Facebook. Follow me everywhere there, so that if for one reason one or the other decides to shut me down or cut me off or whatever the case, you'll always know where to find me. Thanks a lot, everybody. Have a great day. We're out.